welcome to everybody. Some of you might have been to one of our Cape conversations before. For some of you, this might be the first one that you've been to. You are incredibly welcome, whichever is it is for you. And our aim with these conversations, as always, is really to think about some of the topics that matter when you are leading or managing others. And we believe that being what you need to have that courage and confidence to have those great conversations is greater awareness often of the topics and how to maybe start and approach those. So for us today, it is all about the menopause at work. Oh. Animals welcome too. It's all about the menopause at work, and we know there are lots of awareness being raised. There's lots of people talking about this topic, which is brilliant. And we really want to put the focus on what it means for people at work, for employers and leaders and managers, and how they can really support their teams. I'm going to introduce you to Susie and Lisa in a moment to just share with you a bit about themselves, and then what we aim to do throughout this is have a discussion about this topic, and by no means have lots of slides. Have a discussion and think about some of the things that are going to be really important. But just let me introduce myself first, for those of you who haven't met me. So I run a business called Cape Coaching and Development, and as I said at the beginning, we're all about helping people to have great conversations at work. And in terms of this as a topic, actually a year ago, this is a topic that was really not on my radar, not something that I felt was important to think about. And because of unplanned surgery last year, actually it's something that is my everyday now, that I'm living day to day, because of what I now know is surgically induced menopause. So the topic itself and the fact that it impacts people at work, even if they fall outside of that traditional age bracket, is something that is incredibly close to home for me. So I'm really excited to have this conversation and talk a bit more about how that might be affecting others and the support that you can provide. And before I do introduce Susie and Lisa, in particular, just want to stress at the beginning that Lisa's here from Maggie's, and so we might be touching on some topics around cancer treatment and the link to menopause. So really conscious that there may be some of those things that resonate and touch you if you're experiencing that in your life. So Lisa has said that she's there to be in contact with if there's anything that you need to chat about around that afterwards, and likewise with Susie too. So in terms of what we are going to cover then, we're going to think about what we mean by this, by the menopause at work for individuals. We're going to think about busting some misconceptions and why it is actually as relevant for men as it is for women at work. We're going to think about why we should even care about this as a topic for people managers. And as always, we're going to make it really practical and think about some strategies and approaches to enable you to support yourself and your team. So Lisa, Susie, shall I come to you first, Susie? Do you want to just introduce yourself and in the context of what we're talking about today?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I am Susie. I am a pelvic health physiotherapist. So that means that basically I support women from pregnancy, postpartum, and then into the perimenopause and menopause as well. So I see women for all sorts of issues that are related to the pelvic floor, and also about supporting women to kind of get the best menopause journey that they can from a physical perspective. And I'm also a certified women's coach. So I also support women from their kind of thinking about their lifestyle, their well-being, and really, again, just to map their best way that they can navigate this journey through the perimenopause and the menopause. And I support women on an individual basis and also at leadership level and employees in an organisation, and work with an employment solicitor as well, who can write policies around menopause too.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you. And Lisa, I'm just going to come to you in just a second, but I just want to say a big welcome. There was a big group of people in the, as I was just setting up, that I've just now let in from the waiting room. So welcome. And just to very briefly recap on what we said before we started to introduce the topic, we are all about helping people to have great conversations at work. And we are very much focusing on a topic that is quite prevalent in, lots of people are talking about it at the moment, which is brilliant. But the focus we want to bring to this as a topic is what you need to know as a manager and a leader, and how you can support people at work, how this impacts the workplace, and what you can do to ensure that you can still manage performance and productivity whilst really supporting people as they go through this period of their lives. So we've welcomed Susie and Lisa. Do you want to just say a quick hello before we get started?
Thank you, and thanks, Naomi, and welcome everyone to the afternoon session. I'm really looking forward to be part of the this presentation. As Naomi alluded to a little bit earlier, I work for Maggie's. I'm the centre head at Maggie's in Cambridge, but have a clinical background as a consultant radiographer in gynae-oncology, and a real interest in sort of late effects of treatment, and including menopause and treatment-induced menopause. On the back of that, and it's great, the whole topic of menopause is becoming much more spoken about. But I've been doing some work with the All Parliamentary Menopause Support Group down at the House of Lords, looking at how we can really look at policy both within an oncology setting but also within a work setting. So I'm really passionate about how we can support people in the workplace.
Brilliant, thank you. And how lucky we are to have both of you here to have this conversation. So like I said at the beginning, this isn't going to be lots and lots of slides, lots and lots of information. I'm going to do a couple of slides just to set the scene and set the kind of common foundation, and then we are going to have a discussion and ask some questions. I'm going to ask some questions of Susie and Lisa, but I really would welcome if there's any particular questions you have from your organisations, either put your hand up or pop them into chat, and we'll pick those up as we go through as well. So just to set the scene, and I said at the very beginning about how this topic, because of some surgery that I went through, is actually really quite common for me, when a long time, a year ago, I wouldn't have even thought that this would be on my radar. And we'll hear from Lisa in a moment about how actually sometimes the menopause doesn't just affect this category of women who fall within a certain age bracket. But in terms of if people go through a normal menopause, what we mean by this is, as it says there, so it's a very natural part of the aging process that affects every woman, and it's caused by those changes in hormone levels. And it usually, the key word here, usually occurs between the ages of 45 and 55. The average age is about 51. However, many women go through the menopause or have menopause symptoms a lot earlier than that, and perhaps for longer periods, because of cancer treatment or because of other kinds of surgery. And it happens, we get into the mechanics, because a woman's ovary stops producing eggs. And the reason that the symptoms occur is because those levels of those hormones then start to decline. And we often talk, and we hear a lot more around this term perimenopause as well. I know there's so much that Davina McCall has brought to raise awareness around this, but that is that period of time when we're starting to have some of those hormonal changes. And Lisa, can I just, before we get into discussion around how this impacts the workplace, let me just come to you around that misconception sometimes that it only affects people who are within that age bracket. Do you want to just share a bit more on that?
Absolutely, Naomi. And I think what's really interesting is there are many types of treatments now that people can undergo, either be a sort of a surgical removal of the ovaries, chemotherapy treatments, anti-estrogen treatments, which will lower and block production or absorption of estrogen. What we know from evidence and research is those who experience what we call a crash menopause, i.e. the levels are not falling off at that slow level that we would see naturally, but they're literally going from high to low overnight almost, that the intensity of their experience of menopause is significantly worse. And one of the things that's also really important to bear in mind is when you've lost your estrogen at an earlier age, it puts you in a much more significant risk group of developing bone issues. So bone density becomes thinner, heart health is at risk, and there's now emerging evidence that our brain is affected, and we're seeing higher levels of Parkinson's, Alzheimer's in people who have lost their estrogen at a younger age. So there's a huge amount of work that we do here at Maggie's in supporting people to optimize their health and well-being through diet, lifestyle, and exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about this in the workplace, and that is very much our focus today, it isn't just that we can predict that a woman goes through a certain period of her life and will experience these symptoms. Actually, there's lots of other reasons why, lots of other kind of things that come together that mean some of this might affect women a lot earlier, a lot later as well. So yeah, important to bear in mind that there is no one size fits all for how a woman will experience menopause, when she will, or what that will look like. And I think that's a key thing to hold into our discussions as we go through. And then just in terms of those symptoms, I think because of some of the raising of awareness, we're maybe a bit more familiar with that it quite often we know about this idea of hot flushes and what that might mean or look like. But actually, what's really interesting is because we have estrogen receptors in every cell in our body, these reductions in levels can have and can mean that we have symptoms that affect us at all parts of our lives and all parts of our functioning. So anxiety, depression, challenges around our mental health is a big one. That brain fog, Lisa just talked a bit there about the kind of impacts and the links to dementia, but that short term often cognitive changes and problems with memory and concentration, sleeping, not being able to sleep, real kind of significant challenges around this, hot flushes and the impact that can have. And then headaches, migraines, tiredness, muscle and joint pains, loss of self-confidence. For some people, this might be, they might not experience very much of any of these. For some people, it will be almost crippling and debilitating, and there's no real pattern to it. So it's just to get a flavour of actually it's not just that stereotypical hot flush. There are a whole range of symptoms that are involved.
Naomi, can I just come in on the back of that? And I don't know, Susie, you might be able to add into this even more, but one of the things that often isn't spoken about is the changes to the bladder and sexual health, which perhaps one would see that's not directly related into the workplace, but we can see huge impacts on relationships and how that impacts individuals. So clearly, just being aware of that within the whole circle of side effects and symptoms that Naomi's described is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It can affect us as a whole person and therefore how we show up at work as well. Okay, so let's take the slides away for a moment and let's just get into some of the discussion. So we've talked about what it is, how it affects people, the fact that it isn't predictable often and can affect people because of natural causes, but also because of treatment or cancer therapy. Why should we care? If we think about menopause in the workplace, why are we having this discussion? Why is it important? Susie, shall I come to you first?
Yeah. So I think what's really important is some of the stats that we know about, and kind of like the research that's gone into this that can really show the number of women that are leaving their professions because of some of these symptoms. And that can be related to them, like you've already discussed, having low confidence, not feeling like they're good enough at their job. So it isn't always those physical symptoms that are the first to arise. And that's when women can really doubt themselves and put it down to stress. It's often that sandwich generation where you're looking after elderly parents as well as looking after children as well. And so you can lose that sense of self and start to put some of these symptoms down to other things. But actually this can start knocking ladies' confidence. It can really lead to more time off work and losing that part of the workforce that are really knowledgeable and have worked so hard to get to where they are. So it's very much about trying to kind of keep this part of the workforce in the workplace, and providing those cultures that mean that these women feel supported at work to come forward and talk about any issues that they're having.
Yeah, we read a lot, don't we? Or we kind of talk a lot about the fact that if we think about just, naturally occurring menopause, women are often at the top of their game. As an organization, we might have invested heavily into their development and supporting them, and they may be people who are adding real value to our
Absolutely.
organizations, and actually might have some quite significant challenges for a period of time. But as with anything, it's about how can we support them. We're not suggesting here for a second that it's about just letting go of performance and productivity for a period. How can we support people so that they can feel that for themselves and their organisation, that ongoing ability to deliver the best that they can?
Yeah. And often that is just by providing some support and some open communication. And like you say, it's ongoing because it's not something that's a short period of time. So symptoms can change, and what someone might be struggling with at the start of their journey might be something different later on. So it's just really knowing that you want to nourish those relationships to provide whatever you can to keep women in the workplace.
Yeah, fab. Thank you. Lisa, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just come in with, the research, the evidence suggests that 1 in 10 women of menopausal, peri and postmenopausal age will consider giving their job up. So that's a huge number of colleagues who potentially will look to opt out of their profession or career because of the fallout. And I think, just again, with my oncology hat and my cancer hat, I'm just going to come in and say 1 in 2 of us by the mid-2030s will have a cancer diagnosis at some point during our lives. Again, massive impact on the workplace. So if you imagine all of those people that want to return to work, either during treatment or post-treatment, clearly the impact of menopause is going to be even more significant within numbers and intensity.
Yeah, and legally as well. I think we were talking earlier, weren't we, about the fact that the menopause is, we know it's covered by the Equality Act, and we know that it's under one of the it's a protected characteristic. It sits under the protected characteristics of age and sex and discrimination, but it also falls under the Health and Safety at Work Act. And I know there's even further work happening. I'll refer to a report and a guidance note at the end that's doing even more to make this law. Yeah. And I read a stat that you shared the one there, 1 in 10 women, that approximately one study suggested that approximately 14 million work days are lost every year due to menopausal symptoms.
Yeah.
And often we'll come on to that. We'll come on to talk about a bit more about why, but often that is down to people not feeling able to say what's going on with them, and therefore not having the opportunity, or their organisations to have the opportunity to provide workarounds, because very often with some small tweaks, workarounds and support can be provided which enable women to not feel like they have to take that much absence as a result of these symptoms. So we're gonna come on to a lot more about that. So it matters. It really matters in terms of supporting people valuing people, keeping people engaged, but it also really, really matters in terms of the performance and productivity of business. You guys shared some stats there. I'm just going to add a couple more. Sorry, wrong slide. I'm going to add a couple more to it just to have them there, bold in front of us. But the demographic that is affected, as we said, typically at the top of their professional game, typically in senior leadership positions, often people that we really rely on and have invested heavily in supporting in their careers, and they bring huge levels of wealth and experience and skills. And without the awareness and the support, too often these women are choosing to either leave the profession or move into a different role because of how they're being affected. So there is over 9 million women in this age bracket in the UK, if we think about that naturally occurring menopause. There's a recent study by the CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Professional Development, which is the biggest and the most comprehensive study recently, and it looks at experiences in the workplace directly. The focus solely of the report is around menopause and the impact on the workplace. So 73% of people will experience some kind of symptom. 25% of people experience what they term as debilitating symptoms. A Bupa study talked about over 1 million women having left their jobs as a result of their menopause symptoms. And as Susie just said, 10% of women will consider leaving their profession, leaving their roles because of how they feel and not being able to access the support that they might need. Big numbers, really big numbers. And I've just pulled out a couple of quotes. The CIPD report is great because it does have some snippets of real life kind of quotes from some of the women that were interviewed. So this one, so due to forgetfulness and not being as sharp with my recall as usual, I'm often considered, or I feel like I'm considered, less able to present in front of important stakeholders. And that's a huge shift for me. So if we're already having someone who's really doubting themselves, having quite a big shift in their identity and who they feel they are, to then not be able to have those conversations to support them to keep performing at the top of their game is really, really tough. And somebody there talking about having to step aside, step away from a career that they'd worked at for 25 years because of some of the symptoms, and having to move into different kind of work, much lower paid work as a result, and therefore those skills really being lost. So I think we've covered a bit of this already, but Lisa, if I just come to you a second, what are some of the most common misconceptions about menopause in the workplace?
Very, very broad question, because I think, and I was just talking a little bit earlier, I did a similar workshop for a corporate company just yesterday, and was absolutely overwhelmed with the impact that the company had put in place. There was a really sound policy, there was a communication hub, there was regular cafes held for those experiencing menopausal symptoms, and therefore the engagement between the managers, the leadership teams, and the employees was huge, and there was fantastic ways that they'd worked forwards to maintain a level of attendance within the workplace. So I think this is a massive area that people experience, and I always feel that when we're working with people managing menopause symptoms, we need to treat them holistically, and I think that is possible within the workplace. I think sometimes we can have that misconception that actually this is such a big issue, we can't deal with it, we can't legitimize it as a natural process, and therefore we're better just to about it. So I think, you know, just hearing the experience of the company yesterday and seeing how valuable that resource is within the workplace was phenomenal. So I think that, to me, proves one very big misconception, that this can be managed and held.
Yeah, it's kind of breaking down that we talk about it quite a lot with the people that we work with in our programs as well, when the version of us that shows up at work is our whole selves. We just can't physically cut ourselves in the middle and just bring, okay, and this is my work persona that I bring to work. The things that are happening in the rest of our lives have an impact. And just because it is something that isn't directly related to our work persona, what you're just saying there is that you've seen organizations really successfully bring it onto the table and have those discussions about it. Susie and Kylie, I can see your hand up. Susie, come in, and then I'll just...
Okay. Give me the menopause.
Susie, were you going to add something? Or it might have been somebody else chatting, but do you want to come in?
Yeah, so I think that's really important. I think it's just kind of like you said, creating that safe space and acknowledging that it's not just, you know, we've always thought, like you said earlier, about it being hot flushes and those physical signs. So a misconception from my perspective would just be about some of the symptoms as well, and just knowing how broad they can be so that we can be aware. I think one of the first steps is for employers and employees and women themselves to just really know what broad spectrum of symptoms can present. And I know we'll talk about resources later, but there are some great ways that you can just start making some notes of some of those and just be aware of what your symptoms are, so that you can go and speak to managers, and then managers can be aware of all of those things that are affecting a woman. And the more that we know how that presents, the more that you can put things in place to really support people with lifestyle choices, so that your you know, environment at work really promotes just the simple things of getting outside at lunchtime and getting away from the desk, and just all of that, those healthy cultures that can really promote somebody's well-being, in turn their productivity, and then their desire to be at work.
Yeah, absolutely. Small things make massive differences. Kylie, you've got a question. Do you want to come in and ask it now? Oh, I can't hear you. I know you have that bit of a problem at your organisation, don't you, sometimes with links, external links. I don't know if you want to just perhaps just pop it into chat. Yeah, definitely can't hear you. Sorry. Pop it into chat and I'll pick it up there, and we'll come to it. So there's misconceptions about the fact that we can offer support, we can make steps that really improve a woman's experience and enable them to feel supported. And I think one of the most common misconceptions for me as well, for us to think about, is, should this only be a topic that we talk about with women? We kind of, you know, my daughter's of a certain age at primary school, where they're having certain discussions in year 6. And I remember when I was at school that the girls were split up and taken into one room and the boys in another. You know, is this another one of those situations where we should only be talking to women about this, because only women, generally only women experience menopause? What do you think about that? Men versus women, the big debate. Susie?
Yeah, so I just really think it's important that men understand as well and appreciate every man will know a woman. So I'll speak, I'm sure Lisa's going to add other bits as well about men, but I'll just speak from my perspective, is that everybody will know somebody that is going through the menopause, and that might be a relative, a loved one, someone they live with. So I think it's so important to help and foster good relationships, that men as well are involved in all of these discussions, so that they can support the women in their life. And I've gone to a primary school, and the head got all of the staff to come in and listen to me talk about all different, you know, pelvic floor symptoms and everything. And so it was really, you know, people came up and spoke to me at the end about how valuable that was, because they've got people in their lives that they wouldn't necessarily have sat and listened to something like that, but it made them be aware of a lot of those symptoms. So I think it is, you know, a lot of marriages can end in divorce during this period. So I think it's just really important that men are aware of the symptoms so that they can help and be there and be a listener for the people around them, and so in the workplace as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Lisa?
Yeah, I was just going to come in again with the oncology hat on, and I think it's very often there's no understanding that men who maybe have a prostate cancer or themselves have a breast cancer diagnosis will be put onto anti-hormone treatments. And so men will then go through an absolutely typical menopause that we as women would experience. Again, it will be that hugely impactful experience. Their androgens, their hormones will fall off a cliff. They'll experience hot flushes, they'll grow breasts, they'll have low mood, they'll have weight redistribution. And again, for men, that's really challenging because there isn't a menopause group they can just dial up or Google. They're very, very much more alone with it. And when I get a group of men in similar experiences where we get them together, that shared experience and just someone legitimizing and acknowledging that here is a man going through what we would term a menopause is really powerful. And again, I think for you guys, if you're working with people or gentlemen who have a prostate cancer, it's just having that on your radar that they too would probably fall under the menopause policy.
Wow, it's really so we're thinking about men being front and center in this discussion for two reasons. One, because of the fact that every man will likely have to support somebody through this, whether that's somebody that they live with or they care about, but also perhaps have people that they work with and that they might need to be having those conversations with. But on the other side of it, it's an important topic for men because of what you've just said. In certain cancer treatments, men can also go through the menopause, and as you said there, Graham, in the chat, as you've just said, Lisa, the andropause. So a lot of the symptoms that we experience, raising that awareness to enable people to have, greater understanding of some of the implications of the treatment that they may be having to go through. I think, go on, sorry.
I think, even just having a single sentence in a policy acknowledging that can be really valuable to a gentleman who might be going through an andropause, because it puts it on the agenda and it's okay to talk about it.
It almost validates it to a degree, doesn't it? And I think it all comes back to this point around opening up the conversation. People feel so much more able to share, to talk about what they might need in terms of support if the topic is one that is on the table, is out there. A client that I've been working with, they did a whole team awareness session around the menopause just to start the conversation so that everyone there knew that they'd all had the same understanding, so that they knew that there was a common kind of language that they could talk about. And we had somebody who came to me and said it wasn't just useful so that I can provide the support that I need to my team, because men genuinely really want to do whatever they can to support people in their team. But he said it really helped me to just have that conversation at home too with my wife. And he said it's not, and this person that I was talking to said it's not about, I felt like this pressure that I needed to know what to do to make it okay, but actually just asking, what can I do? What support do you need? Was the really valuable takeaway for him, both in the workplace, but as a parallel at home too. Let's just have a quick look at this question, because I know Kylie was trying to speak before. Seeing challenges where women aren't getting enough, the right level, timely help from medical services, people not acknowledging symptoms. So leaving people at the point when they're not getting the medical care they need, and they're consequently having to take time from work. What to do with these scenarios in the workplace?
Naomi, is it okay if I come in?
Yeah, please do.
That? So as I alluded to a little bit earlier, I think from a governmental perspective, it's really important that we raise this, and there are steps to try and improve services. At the moment, a general practitioner will probably have an hour's training on managing menopause. When I run my menopause workshops, they're 2.5 hours, and that's just imparting information to help support people navigate menopause. There's lots and lots of guidance out there, and I think one of the resources that Naomi's put on the slides, the British Menopause Society, is really good for evidence-based recommendations. And so I think, you know, you're in a pivotal position to be able to empower your employees to take that information to a GP. I constantly do it. You know, many of the people I work with clearly have a cancer diagnosis, and it's still not spoken about. So by giving them the evidence and the information, it's empowering them to go and have that conversation with the GP. You don't have to be experts, you just can do the signposting. And again, your employee will then value and appreciate the fact that you are acknowledging that this is an issue for them.
Yeah, and I think one of the other resources that I've put there is that I became aware of, Bupa do what they call a women's health hub, and so Bupa worked together with the CIPD on their recent study, and they offer you don't have to be a Bupa member to have Bupa health insurance, but they offer a flat rate one-off fee, which covers a year's worth of support and advice and community and sessions with a specifically trained GP as part of that. So, you know, I know of some organisations who offer that to people within their team as a health benefit, or at least maybe subsidise it or signpost that if somebody is really struggling to get anywhere with their GPs. So yeah, there's a couple of options there, or a couple of ideas there, but I think it is that the more we can raise awareness about this, the more that we can have this on people's agenda, that the more that there will be a focus on supporting women and on GPs kind of catching up when they maybe aren't. So we've talked, let's just put, before we go into top tips and strategies, then let's just maybe pull together some of the key themes that we've talked about already around what's important to think about in the workplace. So there is that piece around helping people to avoid having to take, you know, the stats that are there about people thinking about leaving their jobs or having to take sick leave. We can, in the workplace, provide small changes, levels of support that help people not have to see that as an option. And we can help really enable women to continue to deliver, to have that same productivity, or to really be at the top of their game still, whilst they're going through some of these symptoms with some of those small tweaks. It's important to recognise that there isn't one size fits all, and that a big part of this is not making assumptions that, especially if you're a woman who's gone through the menopause, that you that the people that you work with are going to be going through it in exactly the same way. But we can do things at work to support people. So what can we do? What would be your top tips for people managers or for organisations? If you could have your top 3, Susie, what would they be?
So I think it's, you know, you could consider having a menopause champion in the workplace, so that you've got some people that are really leading those discussions, people that are interested. Nobody needs to be an expert. That's not what this is about in an organisation. It's just creating a safe space so that you can signpost if somebody comes to you with an issue, that then you can signpost them to a person within your organisation that they can go and speak to and have a safe conversation and create a safe space. I think it's just kind of making sure that you could create support groups within that as well. So there's places that people could meet up if they wanted to and have those conversations. And then menopause training, like we've already talked as well, and it's having kind of, like Lisa going into the workplaces, and I go into workplaces and just talk to people about the menopause or devise some training within your organisation to really create this awareness so that people know the breadth of what this covers and how those symptoms can change over that 10-year or whatever period there might be, and the breadth of age that it covers, so that really we know that it can really affect a lot of different people. And it's just, I was listening to something the other day of like just some examples of, a lady feeling bullied because someone in the workplace kept going, oh, we're opening the window for her, she keeps having them hot flushes. So it's just really those simple things that can, that we just need to really think about it. We talked before about the bladder. I treat a lot of women that are really worried about not getting to the toilet in time because of frequency of going to the toilet. So it could just be a conversation about needing to move where they sit. It's just so simple things that could make such a big difference. But somebody might be too embarrassed to go and speak to their line manager. Because that stat you mentioned before about a 40 million workday lost a year, in that same study that interviewed 38,000 women via a survey, 10% said they would speak to their line manager.
10%. Wow. Yeah.
That was in 2022. So it'd be nice to see those figures change.
Yeah, and I think it's because hopefully it's changing, but there is such a stigma and a taboo about this as a topic, or there has been traditionally. There's something really important in what you said there, Susie, about the aim of raising awareness isn't meaning that as people managers and leaders we have to be experts and we suddenly have to have all this awareness that we can own and tell that person what they need to do. Not at all. We are, it's having that awareness so that we can create a space where it's okay to talk about this, so that we can open up discussions and we can be curious. We can treat it importantly, not kind of, we can treat it seriously, and we can really have greater openness towards all aspects of people's lives that they go through in the workplace, because of how much it impacts what we do when we're at work. Lisa, what else from you? What are your top tips for people managers, leaders and organisations?
I've sort of given this a little bit of thought, and again, what came out of the session I did yesterday, I thought was a fantastic idea, and they've produced posters which they put on the back of every toilet door, including the male toilets, just highlighting the key points around menopause, what to look for, who to approach in the organisation, who would be supportive. So that for me feels like a very simple, easy win, just to, as a company, to be acknowledging this is important enough for us to make sure everybody knows this is on the table for discussion. So that felt really, really important. And then probably the only other one I would sort of at the moment feel quite passionate about is, what as an organisation can you do to provide some of the more holistic approaches towards managing the fallout of menopause? So for example, NICE guidance now recommends that anyone with hot flushes who doesn't wish to take HRT should be offered CBT. So to bring in an expert, we run CBT here. It takes one of my psychologists, she runs it a week apart, 2 hours in each session. So it's 4 hours of a psychologist's time. We do it as a group, and the outcomes we see are phenomenal. So again, what you're doing is you're saying, this is important to us as an organisation. We're going to support this. We're going to give you the time within the working day, and we're going to look at how that intervention, and you can evaluate that with you in your own organisation. But those, again, small tweaks that I think make a big difference.
Yeah, and sorry, I went on mute because of plane flying overhead at that moment. I was going to come in and speak. Yeah, so Graham's just added in something on the back of what you said. We find that the back of the door toilet is a great place to get sensitive messages. Yeah, sensitive messages to all staff. And I think the other thing I would just add is, you know, we might have some managers, some leaders on the call saying, okay, so I really want to support my team, but what happens if performance does dip? You know, what happens when I'm not getting what I need from this person? How do I support them while still making sure that what we need to deliver as a business is delivered? And we talk a lot about, I really love the model by Kim Scott, that radical candor model, which has those two axes of caring personally and challenging directly. So it's a model around really owning and having maybe some of the more difficult conversations. And I think this is relevant here as well. Caring about this person as a whole, saying what needs to be said, but approaching it with a really open mind, not having made assumptions that someone's performance has dropped because of a certain reason, or that because they're a certain age, that means that they've lost their commitment to what they need to deliver. But noticing that performance isn't where it is, bringing that to the table, but doing it in a way that is really open to hearing what they have to say, is really curious, and is really about, I've noticed this and I want to support you to get to this. What can I do? What can we do? What do you need? As opposed to sometimes when we put off having a performance conversation and it gets to the point where really it's at a critical place, and both parties are so frustrated that it becomes a you just need to improve, or we go down a more formal route. How can we start those conversations, whether it's in this situation or any situation? How can we talk about performance and give feedback more frequently in a more timely way, but with an openness that allows that other person to really talk about what might be causing it? Because performance discussions should be positive. They should be with the intent of helping that person to improve. So how can we bring some of that ethos into these kinds of situations? Would be another one that I'd add into the mix. And I think, as always happens, when we raise awareness, whether that's for the individuals going through the menopause or the andropause, and we raise that awareness for them, with them, but also with those that they're surrounded by, it leads to more choices being available, more options being available. So how can we not take on the role of, I've got to solve this and fix this for everyone in my organization, but I just want to raise awareness so everybody has more choice, more options in dealing with these situations. What about individuals? So if we're thinking about individuals who might be in the workplace, who might be thinking, this is really affecting me and I really want to do something about it, what might be your advice to those people? Lisa, shall I come to you first?
Yeah, I think, as I've alluded to, there are some really amazing, good evidence-based organisations out there. And I think having a portfolio of those resources can be incredibly helpful, because, again, you're prepared, you're familiar with the signposting. Again, it's back to not being the expert, but just knowing where the expertise sits. And I probably would say, particularly the British Menopause Society, where there's recommended practitioners within managing menopause, that again is a credible resource that you can tap into and use easily. So I think as an individual, it's trying to help them feel empowered, or how do we as individuals feel empowered? And I think often that's information, it's being heard, it's being valued. So all of those things, I think, come together on an individual basis.
Yeah. Susie, what about you? Advice to individuals in the workplace?
Yeah, so I think, first and foremost is perhaps logging some of your symptoms, and there's lovely resources in the Balance Menopause app, sorry, not act, where you can give you a lovely thing that you can start to log some of those. It's good to have like 3 months worth of symptoms and then present them to the GP. So you've got a real array of what you're coping with and some of those things that are flagging up. And then make a note of when you go and speak to your employer as well, so that you've got something logged. The earlier that you do that, then that just means that's the first port of contact that you've had. So you're doing that as soon, not waiting and sitting on any of those things. But then also recognizing how much your lifestyle can make an impact. And that's really like, we know that HRT is really effective for treating a lot of these symptoms, but also it's a time of your life when you may be too tired, you're getting home from work, you're feeling that fatigue, you're not wanting to exercise, you're perhaps not making the best food choices, because we know that we tend to want to go to more sugary snacks around this time as well. And it could be that, it's that you've got this sandwich generation, you've got children that need attending to, you've got elderly relatives, and you're not getting the time to really focus on you. So many women that I work with have just lost a bit of the sense of self because they're giving to everybody else and sacrificing. And so this is so important for work as well as home life. And this is where it really does balance together, because if you can really focus on getting outside for a walk, doing an exercise class that you enjoy, bringing your lunch that's a bit more nutritious than buying something, all of these things make a massive impact to the person that turns up for work. So I think that's really important as well, those basic foundations.
And actually, this goes hand in hand with a lot of the things that organisations look at around promoting health and well-being too. That all of those initiatives directly support what we're talking about here. And I suppose this one might feel a bit, I'm going to say role modelling as well. And that might feel really difficult and an added pressure if you're right in the midst of this. But being able to speak up, being able to maybe make changes and support changes being made within your organisation will not only support you, but actually will support every other woman in your organisation who might, will need those resources at some point in the future as well. So there's something there to think about, to give us that added level of motivation to want to make change within the teams and the organisations that we work within. I said that I'd share some resources. I'm going to open up for questions in just a moment, but we will share these out with the slides that come out at the end. We'll share the link to the recording as well for anybody who couldn't join. But here are some of the things that we referred to. So I know, Susie, you do lots of work with organisations around supporting them and women individually, but also organisations to create more inclusive cultures around menopause. And Lisa, you do lots, don't you, around the oncology side and supporting people who are going through menopause as a result of their cancer treatments. I've talked about the Bupa Women's Health Hub, which is that one-off payment that gives you this almost cover to think about getting diagnoses and treatment and support maybe in those early stages. British Menopause Society, Balance by Louise Newsome. So Louise Newsome, and I haven't got her on here, but Dr. Naomi Potter, who's recently written a book with Davina McCall as well, are two of the sort of gurus, I suppose, that are quite active on things like Instagram and around, and lots of podcasts, lots of really useful resources there. But the Balance app, what's really nice on there is, yes, there's quite a lot for women individually to do some of the things that Susie said around monitoring symptoms and recording symptoms, but for organisations that she has some templates for policy. So if you're really starting out here and you want to have a policy but don't know where to start, she's got some templates to support that as well. And there's loads of fantastic resources on the Menopause Matter websites, both again for individuals, but lots at work. So whether you are an individual or an organisation, making some of these resources easily available can be really helpful. And then the two reports that I've mentioned, the CIPD report, which is accessible through a Google search, and there is a report on the work that's happening as part of the Women Inequalities Committee around menopause and the workplace. That's still work in progress. So any questions that have come up that this has raised for you, just be thinking, and the final thing I'm just going to touch on before I open that up is what's coming next. So over the next few months, we'll be continuing our discussion around topics that matter when leading and managing others. We're talking about performance and well-being, lots of links to what we talked about here today, future of work, remote work and getting the best from people, something around neurodiversity, more on this topic of great conversations and navigating change and uncertainty. And as always, we're always open to, if there's a particular topic that you think, I'd really like to know some more about this, I don't know where to go, I'm sure there'll be other people, so let us know and we will do one of these webinars on that too.